October 1942, Station 105, Chelston Airfield, England. The surgical tent was crowded with another injured navigator as Colonel Malcolm Cummings Grow leaned over the operating table, his hands carefully extracting fragments of German flak from the young man's chest. The metal shards had ripped through his leather jacket as effortlessly as paper through cloth. Grow's mind catalogued the scene, familiar from countless previous cases in recent weeks. The trajectory was low velocity. The pattern of injury suggested the fragments had lost most of their energy before impact. If only there had been some barrier, anything between this young man's body and the exploding shell outside his bomber. Through the tent, Grow could hear another B-17 touching down, engines rasping after crossing the channel from yet another daylight raid deep into Hitler's Reich. In the distance, more ambulances approached. The arithmetic was crushing. Nearly 70% of casualties arriving at his field hospital exhibited the same type of injury: slow-moving fragments, flak pieces tumbling through the air after anti-aircraft shells detonated around American bombers at 20,000 feet, and shards of the aircraft itself, torn loose by explosions and turned into lethal projectiles within the tight fuselage. The young navigator would survive. Others that day would not. As Grow stepped back from the operating table, he made a decision that would change the calculus of aerial warfare. These injuries were preventable. The technology to prevent them had existed for centuries. Someone just needed to ask the right question. Within months, that question would save the first of what would eventually become thousands of lives. The collapse of unprotected bomber crews had begun on August 17, 1942, when the 97th Bomb Group launched the first American heavy bomber mission of the war. 18 B-17 flying fortresses crossed the English Channel to strike the marshalling yards at Rouen-Sautel in occupied France. Major Paul Tibbets led 12 bombers against the main target while 6 others flew a diversion. All returned safely, but the relatively light resistance near the French coast was deceptive. As the 8th Air Force pushed deeper into German-held territory through the autumn and winter of 1942, casualty reports painted a grim picture that contradicted every assumption about daylight precision bombing. October brought the first comprehensive analysis of 8th Air Force combat injuries. Medical officers compiled data from every wounded airman who passed through British hospitals. The results stunned military planners, who had assumed the primary threat came from German fighters and their machine guns. Instead, roughly 70% of all bomber crew injuries resulted from relatively slow-moving projectiles, not bullets from Focke-Wulf 190s or Messerschmitt 109s, but fragments of exploding anti-aircraft shells and pieces of aircraft torn loose by flak bursts. The flak environment over occupied Europe was unlike anything American planners had anticipated. German anti-aircraft batteries, known as Flugabwehrkanone, flak, had been honed over years of combat. By late 1942, the Luftwaffe had deployed thousands of guns around strategic targets. Standard 88-meter flak guns could reach altitudes above 30,000 feet. Each shell carried a timed fuse designed to detonate at a set altitude, sending hundreds of razor-sharp fragments at lethal velocities. Colonel Grow grasped the medical implications immediately. The October data revealed that torso injuries accounted for the majority of fatal wounds, 36% from chest trauma, and another 39% from abdominal injuries. Together, injuries to the core represented 75% of all bomber fatalities. The solution was simple in theory: protect the torso, reduce deaths. Yet the answer was not obvious. The United States Army Air Forces had no body armor program in 1942. Personal armor had fallen out of favor during World War I, when steel vests proved too heavy for infantry soldiers who prioritized mobility over protection. But aviation presented a different scenario. Bomber crews were already encumbered by oxygen masks, parachutes, and heavy flying suits. They worked in confined spaces where agility mattered less than survival. Most importantly, they faced threats dominated by slow-moving fragments, not high-velocity bullets. Grow's surgical expertise gave him insights that planners lacked. He understood wound ballistics, A fragment from a flak shell traveling 200 yards from detonation to aircraft had lost most of its initial speed. Such projectiles, perhaps traveling 500 to 1,000 feet per second, could be stopped by relatively thin steel plates. The same principle applied to aircraft fragments ripped loose by explosions. They were not armor-piercing rounds traveling at 3,000 feet per second, but tumbling shards already expending their energy. In October 1942, Grow submitted a proposal to 8th Air Force Headquarters requesting approval to develop personal armor for bomber crews. The submission cited the casualty data and included preliminary sketches of a vest using overlapping steel plates sewn into fabric. The design drew inspiration from historical armor, particularly medieval brigandines, which combined small overlapping plates for flexibility and protection. The initial reaction from Air Force leadership was skepticism. Weight was the main concern. Crews already carried roughly 40 pounds of equipment, including parachutes, oxygen systems, and flying suits. Adding armor seemed impractical. Other concerns included cost, production capacity, and whether crews would even wear it in combat. Some officers argued that improving fighter escort coverage would be more effective than body armor. Grow persisted. He proposed a small-scale field test. Produce a limited number of vests, issue them to crews, and compare casualty statistics against unarmored crews. Let the evidence prove the concept. Headquarters approved the trial with one caveat. The armor had to be produced quickly and outside standard military supply channels. Grow turned to the British for help. The Royal Air Force had experimented with body armor for their bomber crews but encountered difficulties. British bombers, especially the Avro Lancaster, had extremely cramped crew positions, making bulky armor impractical. By late 1942, RAF armor experiments had been abandoned as unworkable. American bombers, however, offered slightly more room. The B-17 and B-24, while still tight, allowed for armor that wouldn't have fit in a Lancaster. What had failed for the RAF might succeed for the U.S. The British introduced Grow to the Wilkinson Sword Company, a firm with a remarkable history in armor development. Established in 1772, Wilkinson had earned its reputation producing swords, bayonets, and eventually razors. However, the company retained expertise in metallurgy and a long-standing tradition of armor work dating back to the Victorian era, when it manufactured bulletproof vests for British officers in colonial campaigns. During World War I, Wilkinson had produced body armor for officers, though its weight limited popularity. By World War II, the company focused primarily on aircraft fire suppression systems, yet still possessed the technical know-how to work with armor plate. In October 1942, Grow visited Wilkinson's facility with his preliminary designs and medical data. The resulting collaboration was a rare union of military medicine and civilian manufacturing. Grow contributed his understanding of wound ballistics and human anatomy, while Wilkinson supplied advanced metalworking and production expertise. Together, they refined the design through numerous iterations, balancing protection, weight, and mobility. The final model consisted of 3 modular components. The primary vest shielded the torso front and back. A separate apron covered the lower abdomen and groin, and an additional piece could be customized for specific crew positions, such as the ball turret gunner facing unique angles of threat. Each section incorporated 2-inch square manganese steel plates, roughly 1 millimeter thick, overlapping slightly and stitched into heavy canvas outer shells backed with soft cotton for comfort. The choice of manganese steel was crucial, offering sufficient hardness to stop or deflect slower-moving fragments while remaining light enough for practical use. Individually, the plates weighed just a few ounces, yet together they provided full coverage for vital areas. The combined vest and apron weighed about 22 pounds, hefty, but justified by the lives it protected. The armor included a rapid-release mechanism, with colored cords allowing crews to jettison the system instantly in emergencies such as bailing out. By early 1943, Wilkinson had produced prototype suits for testing, and the first missions demonstrated promising results. Field hospitals reported wounded crew members wearing armor with flak fragments embedded in the plates but failing to penetrate. These early successes revealed that the thin manganese steel could stop fragments whose energy had already diminished during flight. By spring 1943, demand for the armor surged across 8th Air Force bases in England. British production capacity through Wilkinson Sword, however, could not meet the growing need, producing only about 100 suits per month, far short of the thousands required. In summer 1943, GROW arranged for domestic manufacturing. The War Department approved U.S. production, involving a partnership between military arsenals and civilian facilities, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Museum armor specialists, skilled in medieval brigandine techniques, adapted historical designs to modern materials. Stephen Grants, curator of the Arms and Armor Department, led research that directly influenced the M6 Flyer's vest, integrating lessons from centuries of armor craftsmanship into life-saving wartime equipment. U.S. production began mid-1943, with multiple facilities producing variations of the design. The standardized M1 vest replaced the canvas with nylon for greater durability and water resistance while retaining the cotton backing. Steel plates followed Wilkinson's specifications. Production rapidly scaled, and by October 5, 1943, the M1 vest was issued to all 8th Air Force bomber crews. The program included modular components: M2 vests for pilots and co-pilots, M3 aprons for ball turret gunners, M4 aprons for waist gunners, and M5 groin protection for seated personnel, allowing crews to adapt protection to their specific positions. Initial resistance from crews disappeared after first-hand combat experience. By early 1944, the program expanded to include the M3 helmet, with overlapping manganese steel strips over a leather base, providing superior fragment protection. Official studies of 1,117 battle casualties showed that fatalities among armored crews dropped dramatically. Chest wounds fell from 36% to 8%, abdominal wounds from 39% to 7%, a 77% and 82% reduction respectively. Overall injuries decreased by 58%, with total wounds reduced 60%. While armor could not prevent all deaths, head injuries, limb wounds, extreme angle hits, and large caliber impacts remained lethal. It effectively countered the predominant threat: low-velocity fragments. October 14, 1943, saw the Black Thursday raid on Schweinfurt's ball-bearing factories. With 291 B-17s dispatched, losses were heavy: 60 bombers destroyed, 17 irreparably damaged. But medical assessments confirmed that armor had saved many lives. Survival rates further improved when long-range P-51 Mustangs began escorting bombers into Germany, neutralizing enemy fighters before they could reach bomber formations. By Normandy, in June 1944, the 8th Air Force was a seasoned and protected force, with the armor program equipping nearly all crews. By war's end, 338,780 M1 vests and 95,919 M2 vests had been produced. From GROW's initial October 1942 analysis to full-scale production in late 1943, only a year had passed, a testament to rapid wartime innovation. Allied cooperation was critical. British expertise, reverse lend-lease of 9,600 flak jackets, and the Metropolitan Museum's historical research were integrated with U.S. industrial capacity. GROW continued to innovate, developing improved oxygen systems, heated clothing, hand warmers, casualty bags, and rest homes for combat-stressed crews. He was awarded the Legion of Merit in July 1943 and the Distinguished Service Medal in May 1944 for his contributions. After the war, GROW became the acting air surgeon for the Army Air Forces in 1945, air surgeon in 1946, and the first Surgeon General of the independent U.S. Air Force in 1949. He retired as a Major General later that year and passed away on October 20, 1960, at 72. His armor program directly influenced Korean and Vietnam-era protective gear, and laid the conceptual groundwork for modern body armor, from Kevlar vests to ceramic plates. Every life saved by flexible armor traces back to Colonel Malcolm Grough's pioneering work during World War II. There are no heroic last stands or miraculous victories against impossible odds in this story. Instead, it is a tale of meticulous observation, careful data analysis, inventive problem-solving, and persistent navigation of bureaucracy. Colonel Grough noticed recurring patterns in the injuries he treated. He linked those patterns to a solution inspired by historical precedent. He partnered with unlikely collaborators to design and test that solution. He championed its adoption despite skepticism. He succeeded because the evidence was compelling and the need urgent. The Flak vest program proved that technology could save lives even in the most lethal environments, provided that the right problems were identified and addressed methodically. Protection does not require total invulnerability, just sufficient defense against the most frequent threats to significantly reduce casualties. The M1 flyer vest could not stop every projectile, but it did not need to. Its goal was to block the majority of fragments most of the time, and it accomplished that. The combined bomber offensive exacted an enormous toll. By the end of the war, the 8th and 15th Air Forces together had lost over 27,000 airmen killed in action and another 9,000 wounded. RAF Bomber Command suffered more than 55,000 fatalities, with roughly 18,000 wounded. These staggering numbers highlighted the importance of any measure that could improve survival. Body armor became one of the most effective life-saving initiatives of the air war, reducing overall casualties by 60% and fatal torso wounds by more than 77%. Airmen flying through flak-filled skies over Germany in 1944 had dramatically better odds than those performing the same missions in 1942. Fighter, escorts, and improved tactics contributed to survival, but body armor addressed the single most common cause of casualties. Thousands of men returned home safely because one surgeon insisted that their injuries were preventable and worked tirelessly to prove it. The Malcolm Grough Medical Center at Andrews Air Force Base stands as a tribute, ensuring that future Air Force medical personnel remember the surgeon who pioneered modern protective gear. Grough's innovations extended beyond the flak vest. He developed wind-blast shields for gunners, electrically heated clothing to combat frostbite, improved oxygen systems, psychiatric support programs, and rest facilities for combat-stressed airmen. Each advancement was targeted, based on systematic analysis of medical data. In later decades, the Metropolitan Museum of Art created exhibits linking medieval brigandine armor to the M1 flyer vest, displaying a 15th-century brigandine beside a wartime vest. The display illustrated how principles of layered plates were adapted from ancient armor to modern materials. Wilkinson's sword returned to civilian production after the war, but retained pride in its wartime contribution. Company histories emphasized its collaboration with Grough and the development of equipment that saved thousands of lives. The flak vest story illustrates lessons still relevant today. Innovation often emerges from unexpected places. A surgical officer, not a procurement specialist, identified the problem. A sword manufacturer, not a traditional armor company, provided initial production. A fine arts museum, not a military research lab, offered critical design expertise. Success came from combining diverse knowledge and capabilities. The program also underscored the power of data-driven decisions. Grough's initial proposal relied on medical statistics. Testing verified effectiveness, and production expansion was justified by reduced casualties. At every stage, evidence, not assumption, guided decisions, overcoming skepticism and bureaucratic inertia. Importantly, the program proved that lives could be saved through protective technology even in deadly environments. In 1942, conventional wisdom accepted that bomber missions over Germany would inevitably be bloody. Grough rejected this fatalism, demonstrating that better protection could reduce, but not entirely eliminate, casualties. The flak vest became one of the fastest and most successful military innovations of World War II. From identifying the problem in October 1942 to full implementation in late 1943, the timeline included design, testing, contract negotiation, production scaling, and logistics, an extraordinary feat. The program succeeded through evidence of need, practical solutions, collaboration between military and civilian entities, and steadfast support from Air Force leadership, who understood that crew protection was vital to sustaining bombing campaigns. In military medicine, Colonel Grove's work represents a triumph of systematic observation and evidence-based innovation. He recognized patterns in casualties, identified preventable causes, designed practical solutions, validated them through testing, and persevered until adoption was complete. His principles continue to protect military personnel and law enforcement officers today. The underlying method remains unchanged. Identify the threat, design appropriate protection, balance weight and effectiveness, test in real conditions, and issue as standard equipment. The mathematics of aerial warfare were altered by body armor. Chest fragment fatalities dropped from 36% to 8%, fundamentally changing survivability, crew psychology, and tactics. Crews with confidence in their chances of survival flew more aggressively, and commanders could plan missions knowing losses were manageable. This story serves as a reminder that innovation can emerge from unexpected sources. Bureaucracies can be navigated when stakes are clear. Collaboration produces superior results, and data-driven decisions outperform assumptions. Most importantly, it shows that individuals can make a lasting impact. One surgeon, working with a sword company and an art museum, saved thousands of lives and transformed military thinking on protection. The Flak vest program embodies the principle that careful observation, inventive thinking, and relentless advocacy can overcome even the gravest challenges when lives are at stake. That is the enduring legacy of Colonel Malcolm Grow, a testament to what one determined individual can achieve with data, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to safeguarding those who serve.